Hello, you are all welcome. We can start.
Hello, Assalamualaikum. Is the moderator here?
Hello, everyone.
Hello, Assalamualaikum.
Okay, welcome all of you to this international conference, and I really appreciate your time and the paper you are going to present. So in this sessions, I hope that we will have a good session and a good discussions, and we will have a good paper to listen. So now I want to give permission to a presenter to start their presentation. Hello.
Hello, yes, we can hear you.
Yes. Go ahead. Yes.
Sorry, who should present first, Doctor?
Yeah, you can start.
Okay. 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 Let me just share my screen. Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
Okay. Can you see the slides?
Yeah. Yes, it's
Okay.
visible.
Okay. Let me just check and open my video. I'm sorry. Yeah, let me just change the background a bit. Okay. Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Shabir, the moderator. Thank you to the organizers of Karcief. Okay, and thank you for the participants for joining in. Okay, my name is Dr. Said Marwan. I'm a lecturer at IUM Institute of Islamic Banking and Finance. Okay. So the paper that I'm presenting today is entitled A Proposal for Social Impact Measurement Framework for Digital Banks in Malaysia. Sorry, is there anyone that is opening the mic because I hear some echo?
Yeah, sorry, I'm closing.
Okay. So yeah, so let me just jump straight to it. Yeah, Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul 'uqdatam min lisani yafqahu qawli. So just an acknowledgement. Okay, basically this paper was part of a research grant that was provided by the Ministry of Education Malaysia, and basically the grant researched on social impact measurement in Malaysia, and the team members consist of myself, Dr. Said Marwan, And also number 2, Associate Professor Dr. Said Musa, and number 3, Assistant Professor Dr. Nur Harina, who are all IIBF lecturers. And there are 2 graduate research assistants, Brother Miran Jasir and Siti Maisara. Okay, so this is just the team members of the research. So the paper itself is part of this grant, and hopefully we can benefit from it. Okay, so just an introduction to basically the origins of the paper. When it comes to digital banks, okay, basically the digital banks are banks that offer banking products and services wholly or almost wholly through digital or electronic means. Okay, so they are expected to provide similar products and services to normal brick and mortar banks, but through a digital channel. Okay, so what happened in Malaysia was that a few months back, in April 2022, the Central Bank of Malaysia, Bank Negara Malaysia, BNM, announced 5 successful applicants for digital banks. Okay, so this is a new licenses because we don't have we don't have fully digital banks yet in Malaysia, right? So it is expected maybe at around 12 to 24 months, the digital banks will start to operate after their success here of obtaining the licenses. And basically, these 5 successful applicants were selected from 29 final applications, okay, that went through a thorough process assessment by BNM. And this assessment criteria covers 4 main aspects. Basically, number 1, the character and integrity of the applicants. Number 2, the nature and sufficiency of financial resources. Number 3, soundness and feasibility of business and technology plans. And number 4 is the ability to address financial inclusion gaps meaningfully, right? So the focus of our paper is basically looking at number 4, okay, the focus on financial inclusion, okay, and this is the proposal is basically we can do this through undertaking social impact measurement. Okay, so just briefly here, this is just a summary of how the Central Bank of Malaysia assessed the applicants. Okay, there's a lot of criteria here, but let me bring your focus towards the ones on the right. Okay, so basically the overview in terms of how they assess the applicants were based on the prudential aspects and technology aspects, but the focus related to this paper is in terms of the ones in the circle, basically when it comes to the commitment of financial inclusion and best interest of Malaysia, right? So this is the requirement for the applicants who want to open a digital bank in Malaysia, right? And basically, when it comes to this application, what the central bank did was that they issued a framework, licensing framework. So anyone who wants to open a digital bank or intends to open a digital bank have to adhere to this framework. Okay, and part of this framework mentions what are the factors for consideration in assessing the best interest of Malaysia criteria. Okay, and if you look at 7.2, the central bank basically mentions that the digital bank must have a commitment in driving financial inclusion, including ensuring quality access and responsible usage of financial services, particularly to underserved and hard to reach segments that may be unserved, which includes retail as well as micro, small and medium enterprises in a sustainable manner without jeopardizing the interest of depositors. Okay, and in the licensing framework also mentions 10.3, which talks about the digital bank's business plan. So basically the applicant must come up with a business plan, and in the business plan, if you look at 10.3b, the plan shall include basically a description of who are the underserved and unserved, and number 2 is what are the proposed financial products and services that will be offered, and for example, a solution that encourages build up of savings or financial buffers including retirement savings by the unserved and underserved. Also, they have to include number 3 there, the pro forma financial statements, whereby what is the share of business that is focusing on unserved and underserved. And then finally, number 4, which I think is the most related, or the focus for related to this paper, which is the performance indicators, which reflect the applicant's value proposition in driving the financial inclusion objectives. Okay, so as we saw in the framework, application framework just now, basically this becomes part of the problem statement of this paper, which is what is the mandate for digital banks when they eventually operate. Okay, basically we can summarize that the digital banks are required to fulfill mandates of driving financial inclusion for underserved and unserved, and they must include performance indicators in showing that they are actually doing something for the underserved and unserved. Okay, and these performance indicators must also demonstrate what is the progress that the digital banks are doing. Okay, so the idea for this paper is basically answering the question that comes about from this problem statement. Okay, basically, how does digital bank fulfill the mandate? Okay, how does the digital bank show all these mandates? And the paper proposes that part of this effort must be is that basically the digital banks must undertake social impact measurement. Okay, and therefore this comes to the objectives of the paper, which proposes a social impact measurement framework for digital banks in Malaysia, so that they can assist the digital banks in fulfilling their mandate. And the method of this paper is basically we undertook a critical review of literature to develop the framework, and we reviewed literature related to Maqasid Sharia, SDG, sustainability, impact investing, and also value-based intermediation. And from there, we come up with the framework that we finally proposed for the digital banks. But basically, the proposal of social impact measurement, right? It is something that is not quite understood. Okay, so therefore, let's just go through what is actually social impact measurement, right? So here I broken it down in the paper into 4 parts. Okay, basically, what is social impact measurement? Why social impact measurement? How social impact measurement? And now what for digital banks especially? Okay, so what is social impact measurement? If we look at the definition, basically it is a process of understanding how such social change occurred and can be attributed to an organization's activities, right? So if we look at this definition itself, there are 4 parts to the definition. Number 1 is that there is a process. Okay, there is a process of understanding. Okay, whereby if we try to imagine from the perspective of a food processor, right? We have a food processor, or in other words, blender, right? So in a blender or a food processor, there are inputs that we put in. Okay, and once we blend, there will be an output that will come out, right? So depending on what is being put in, there might be different outcomes or outputs, right? So sometimes the desired output may not be as what we expected, but therefore we have to change what is the inputs. Okay, so this process is ongoing and continuous as we seek to produce our desired output. Okay, so that's part number 1. And then part number 2 is looking at understanding. Okay, as part of the definition is understanding, and basically to understand, the institution can seek to answer the questions such as where are we now, where do we want to go, and how do we get there, and how do we improve. Okay, and thirdly is how much. Okay, it is basically also important because here is where the organization seeks to measure how much of the output or the impact that they have done is basically attributed to their own activities. Okay, and the organization has to ask itself the question of what is actually our impact. Okay, and then finally is in terms of the fourth aspect, which is the organization's activities. And this is arguably related to all the three previous aspects. And this is another process of self-reflection where the organization seeks to answer the questions such as, what are we doing? Does it bring any impact? And have we fulfilled our objectives or mandates? So basically, when we look at this definition, there are various layers of social impact measurement that organizations or institutions has to address, right? So this is part of the social impact measurement. Okay, so in terms, when it comes to the digital banks, the social impact measurement basically focuses on measuring their progress on fulfilling the mandates of financial inclusion. Okay, so they have to measure whether or not they have achieved the objectives of providing financial inclusion for the unserved and underserved. Okay, and then maybe, and the next part is the question of why. Okay, the question of why. Why should organizations or digital banks undertake social impact measurement? Okay, and there was a research undertaken by Global Impact Investing Network back in 2020, whereby they surveyed impact investors. And these impact investors were already undertaking impact measurement. And they asked them, why are you undertaking impact investing and measurement? Okay, and the investors responded, basically, number one, the most popular answer is that on the left side there, basically, is to better understand whether our impact demonstrates progress towards our goals. And then secondly, to proactively report impact to key stakeholders. Thirdly, to improve impact performance. Fourthly, to capture business value from the impact data. And then fifthly, to communicate impact for marketing and fundraising purposes. And then after that, to address clients' demand for this information. And finally, to adhere to government regulation to measure and report impact, right? So this is the response from the survey, right? So if we summarize the response, basically, we can argue that there are four answers to the question of why undertake impact measurement. Basically, number one is that the organization can achieve the goals. Okay, and this is related to basically aligning the institution's goals and mission with the objectives. Okay, and this may include the aspects of sustainable goals, including sustainable development, and also beyond that, it looks towards how the institution can remain relevant and impactful for many generations to come, right? So here the institution has to reflect on its reason of existence or the true north. Okay, and for Islamic institutions, it has to also look at whether or not it has fulfilled the maqasid al-Sharia or the objectives of the Sharia. Okay, and then number two is in terms of whether why measure is basically to communicate to stakeholders. Okay, so here the aspects of transparency, accountability, and credibility comes into play. Okay, so as we saw, especially post global financial crisis in 2008, there was an emergence on aspects such as transparency, accountability, and credibility, which call for institutions to show their performance and results beyond the financial matters, right? So investors and customers, especially socially responsible and conscious ones, were demanding more information related to the effects or impacts from the funds that they have invested in. Okay, and this basically the socially conscious institution may actually see this as an opportunity to communicate impact that can capture the market of socially responsible investors, right? So hence this becomes a prospect for institutions to capture the business value from the impact measurement and their data. Okay, and then thirdly, why measure? Basically, the Japanese, right? The Japanese, they have a word for this, which is called Kaizen, right? And basically this means continuous improvement, right? So for an institution to undertake impact measurement is basically a way for them to learn and to improve, right? And they do this by having a target and align it to their objectives and mandates, right? And this is a continuous process, right? So it doesn't only apply to digital banks, but it can apply to any organization, Islamic banks, zakat organizations, wakaf organizations. So the measurement can help them to improve their institution. Okay, and then fourthly, why measure is because of regulatory requirement, right? So there are some jurisdictions where it is a requirement for them to undertake social impact measurement and performance measurement. And in Malaysia, related to this requirement, we have the value-based intermediation framework by the central bank, which also looks into impact measurement. And then secondly, which is related to the paper, is in terms of the digital banks requirement that they have to also have indicators and show progress on whether or not they are fulfilling the mandate of financial inclusion. Okay. Now on the question of how, right? So once we know what it is, why we undertake social impact measurement, then the question is, how do we undertake social impact measurement for digital banks? Okay. Basically, the idea for
I
social
think
impact,
this is one of the important aspects that how we can do, because there's a lot of suggestion we can have, but normally there may be a lack of how we can do, like we can receive a lot of suggestion regarding these digitalization, digital banks and this modern terms. But the question is, we understand also, not too much detail, but a little bit. But the question is how to do. I think this is one of the important aspect. Thank you very much. Continue.
Okay. So basically, how do you pursue social impact measurement, right? So the idea is that when we did the research, basically when we look at the various literature and various applications of social impact measurement, we found that there is no one size fits all, right? You cannot apply similar standards to all organizations, right? So this basically, when you look at, basically you cannot apply standards of impact measurement to zakat and also wakaf. So it cannot be the same, right? Similarly, for digital banks, you cannot have one size also for digital banks, right? So even for digital banks, it may depend on the organization. So you cannot just simply ask each organization to have similar impact measurements, right? So the idea basically is that in order for the organization to have a proper social impact measurement that fits its size and fits its situation, they must come up with a impact measurement and management framework, okay, which is part of the proposal of this paper. Okay, so what is impact measurement and management framework? This is basically a process by which the impact organization or the institution can understand the effects of their investments, products, and services, and measure them, and then take action to adapt processes and improve outcomes, right? And this basically provides a framework to test whether the products and services and portfolio of investment is achieving the impact goals, right? So in the case of digital banks, the mandate or the goal is to provide products and services that can address the gap of financial inclusion, right? So this is the idea for the framework, okay? And this is relatively new, okay? Especially when it comes to the Islamic finance environment, okay? But there is a lot of potential, okay? Because actually the financial institutions in the West, especially, okay, they are already undertaking it. Okay, they are already undertaking it, and we can learn a lot from them on how they measure the social impact. Okay, so as part of this impact measurement and management framework, it requires aspects such as principles, frameworks, and standards. right? So this is an excerpt from the research, the report from Rockefeller. Basically, they propose that in order to come up with the framework, you have to come up with what is the purpose of the organization, and then what is the scope, and then they provide some examples here. Okay, so in terms of the principles, okay, this is just an example, yeah, and basically you can apply this to any institution. Okay, but the focus for this paper is for digital banks. Okay, so basically the example for the principles, there's already a lot of established principles that has been provided. Okay, for example, here they show that even the United Nations have already the PRI, the EVPA principles, impact investing principles. Right, so these are the guidelines if we want to come up with the digital banks principles as well. You can refer to these documents. Okay, and then the next part is the frameworks. Right, so the framework that is required, or you can refer to when it comes to coming up with the measurements or the indicators to measure the financial inclusion for digital banks, you can refer to the SDGs, for example, and then there is also the group of 8 impact measurement working group report, and from there you can also come up with basically as a guideline for digital banks as well. And then finally is the standards. There's a lot of standards already established as well. BLAT, IRIS, UNDP, SDG. And the idea basically, in the paper, basically we say that we cannot just simply follow each, or we take one framework or one standard and we follow it for Malaysia. Okay, so we have to come up with our own framework. Okay, we cannot just simply take their framework that has already been established and adopt it, right? So we have to come up with our own framework, and this is where at the end of the presentation, I will show you the framework that we have come up with. But basically, this is part of the process that we have gone through, and we have researched this. And basically, there are a lot of frameworks when it comes to impact measurement, and we have to try to find what is suitable for Malaysia. Okay, and then as part of this as well, there must be a 4-phase framework of impact measuring. Okay, and this is broken down into the plan, and then do, assess, and review. Okay, so part of the plan is that the institution that wants to undertake impact measurement, they must come up with what is their goal and what is their outcome, and they must also come up with what is the indicators of how do you measure. Okay, what is the metrics. Okay, so in the case of digital banks, the metrics is related to financial inclusion. So I will show you later some of the indicators. But then the second part is do. So you have, after you have identified the indicators, you do the data collection and the data validation. And then the third part is data analysis. So there is a lot of big data when it comes to impact measurement. And then thirdly is review. Once you have the data, you analyze the data, you review the data, and from there you improve and report to the stakeholders. Okay, so this is generally how you come up with the impact measurement framework. Okay, but now specific to digital banks, now what? Okay, for digital banks, basically the idea is that the digital banks have to clearly specify what is their mandate and what is their vision. Okay, what is the mandate? Mandate is provided by the central bank. The central bank says you have to do financial inclusion. Okay, but then maybe there is other mandates coming from their shareholders. For example, shareholders say you must also remain profitable, for example, right? So there is there must be a way that all these objectives or mandates have to align to each other, and this is part of the vision of the digital banks. And therefore they must also come up with the objectives, and these objectives must also basically fulfill the mandates. Okay, and then thirdly is they have to come up with the specific inputs, right? So as I mentioned, part of the impact measurement is that you put the input into the processor and then an output will come up, okay? But then the input must also be measurable and related to the mandate and vision. And then after that, you have to come up with the minimum outcome, which indicates whether the objectives have been achieved. And then finally, how can you report this to the stakeholders, right? So for digital banks, when it comes to identifying the inputs and outcomes, they can basically, you have to go back to the guidelines by the central bank. Okay, and the focus for the inputs and outcomes or the mandate for digital banks is for the unserved and underserved, right? And the idea is that Bank Negara, central bank, has not explicitly defined who are the underserved, right? So here we are proposing that the underserved can be for what you call categories. It can be social impact investors, it can be retail investors, thirdly it can be Islamic social finance investors, and number 4 is the uninsured, right? So this is part of the mandate, should be part of the mandate for digital banks, okay? And then when it comes to sources of inputs and outcomes, there's a lot of references, but here I provide the example. You go back to the Bank Negara guideline, whereby you look at the outcomes that they mentioned. Basically, you have to, for the digital banks, they have to increase convenient access to financial services, and then they have to provide more effective usage of financial services by citizens, and then thirdly, enhance the quality of financial services that satisfies the financial needs of all citizens, including the underserved, right? And then another guideline provided by the central bank in how do you measure financial inclusion. The link is there in the report, but basically they have already provided what is the indicator. Okay, so basically the indicator can be used as a reference for the digital banks in measuring their progress, right? So here there are 4 dimensions in terms of convenient accessibility, take-up rate, responsible usage, and satisfaction level, right? So these are some of the literature that we have gone through in coming up with the framework. Okay, so this is the final slide. Basically, when it comes to overall coming up with the framework for digital banks, okay, there are 3 stages that we are proposing for this framework. Number 1 is that the digital bank must identify what is their reason of existence, and this reason of existence, the terminology that is used is true north. Okay, so the true north is basically like a ship. When they go to sail, when they are lost, they have to go look at the compass. Okay, so the compass will show what is the north, where is the true north. So the compass will show what is the way to arrive to the destination. So the digital banks must identify the true north by clearly identifying the key goals, the mandates, and the fundamental objectives of the institution, and they must provide clarity on the priorities that is related to social impact. Okay, so once the true north is identified, you then the banks must then initiate theory of change. So under the theory of change, so this is the second stage, there are basically 9 steps. Okay, basically, and here the digital bank must identify what is the problem statement, what is the impact statement, what is the outcomes, what is the outputs, what is the rationale for these outcomes and outputs, what are the assumptions, what are the risks, what are the factors, and what are the resources that are available to them. Okay, and in stage 2, this is where they also integrate the variables. Okay, in the case of digital banks, the variables are related to financial inclusion, right? So how do you put in you put in the variables here, and then finally in stage 3, you undertake stakeholder alignment, whereby there is engagement and agreement from the shareholders and stakeholders, and they validate the KPIs and the targets for the banks. Okay, and then finally, when you have that alignment, you you go through the four process of impact measurement, whereby there is action planning, and you integrate the critical success factors here. You come up with the framework and roadmap, and then next one is you have the action. You do the data collection, data validation. And then next one is progress assessment. Okay, you assess the impact and then effectiveness and improve from there. And then finally is the stage where you communicate the data and information, where you have progress report and real-time dashboard. And from this stage 7, you repeat back stage 4. So here it is a continuous process. It is ongoing process in order to fulfill the mandate of the digital banks. Okay, so I think that's all from me. And I apologize if I go over the limit for the time, but I hope you have benefited from the presentation.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's a very wonderful presentation. So I really appreciate Dr. Said Marwan for their time and their wonderful presentation. Of course, you share your project detail, also that it's a kind of projects that also contribute. That's why it's also look from the quality of the work you have done. Okay, thank you very much. Now the floor is open for Q&A. So anyone have a comments or any suggestion, they're welcome. Okay, I think let me ask a very basic question. Since we have limited time, just 1 hour, and just let me, I will try to be as brief as possible, and also expect you to, in terms of your answer. Normally, whenever we are talking about digital banks and also the impact on financial inclusion, or these social aspect are deprived class of society. Of course, they play important role. There are two main questions normally we hear. One is that the modern bank also have their digital platform. Nowadays, we have mobile, and which you are using app. So through app, you can pay bills, you can transfer money, and you can do almost a majority of these things which we expect from a digital banks. This is one thing, and then the second is that they also contribute to the society in terms of helping, or at least giving this access to the banking system after these mobile app, after these, for example, ATM is also a part of digitalization. So how you address this mainstream argument whenever we are talking about digital banks? This is one thing. Secondly, as we have that there's a lot of expectation we have from Islamic Bank, and of course many scholars are criticizing Islamic Bank, particularly when it's come to contribution to society in the perspective of these, as you mentioned, value-based intermediations, or you can say access to finance. Or Islamic Bank is also going with the same approach of collateral-based financing. If you have money, you have asset, then Islamic Bank will give money, otherwise not. So how to reconcile these Islamic Bank situations having digital banks? And secondly, the first question is regarding that how they are different from the mainstream banks. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Shabir. Basically, from my understanding, because we haven't implemented it yet, but when we go through the literature and we research the digital banks in other countries that have already established digital banks, so the idea for digital banks is that they have an advantage in terms of cost, okay, because they are not operating in the physical world. So in the aspect, for example, in terms of bank branches, they are not required to open bank branches, right? So the normal banks, they have a bank branches, and this of course has a lot of cost. You have to open a branch, you have to hire people at the branch.
Yes,
and then
yes.
So although the current banks, they already have the apps, and these apps of course offer similar products and services to you can see it's also similar to digital banks, but they have higher costs because they are also operating in the physical world. Right? So this cost
Yes.
is basically a disadvantage for the normal banks, but in terms of for digital banks, this is an advantage. So therefore, because they have low cost, they can take advantage of providing and focusing the cost that they were supposed to, you can say, if they were opening a brick and mortar branch. So now they can focus for their mandate. So they can focus for financial inclusion. And so there's the advantage that they have. And also because they cannot open the branch, right? And they cannot open a physical store or physical branch. Therefore, they can also put some of their budget on focusing on the financial technology, right? And therefore, their focus will be more than the normal banks. And you can argue that because of that, they will be more advanced in terms of financial technology. And they can, because of that, they will come up with products that are more advanced and can address the issues of financial inclusion.
I think, Doctor, maybe you haven't discussed in this presentation. Of course, it's a very short presentation, and maybe in detailed documents you have this, like, for example, how to localize these digital terms, these digital apps. For example, if you go to a Penang, a very, you can say, a rural areas, then how to translate these English terms or maybe these apps in a local language, and also feasible to the local population, particularly those who are illiterate or have very limited knowledge of these digital banks.
Okay, so for Malaysia, basically, because we tried to look at this aspect for Malaysia, and what we found out is that in terms of access to apps and opening up accounts, Malaysians are generally quite what you say is covered. I think more than 97% of Malaysians have access to the apps.
Okay, good.
And
good.
they already have, the coverage is already there, but now the idea is coming up with products and services that can help them be included in the banking sector or the financial sector, because now generally many people have bank accounts, but they don't have a product or service, right? So they just put money in the bank, but they do not have takaful, for example, or they do not have access to capital
Actually,
market.
Prof, your work is more or less in some way related to my work. Actually, I don't know, it's a part of your PhD, like you have worked. I'm not sure, or you just have an independent project. But my work was also related to not specifically financial inclusion, but it was regarding, maybe you hear the term informal sector, or we can informal or unofficial economy. Some people call it shadow economy. Maybe hear these terms.
Yes.
My work was mostly concerned regarding this area, but I think it's interesting, and we can discuss many aspects since you have a similarity with my work. But hopefully we can communicate, and we can work in future as well, and also other friends who are working in Islamic finance area in specific, and of course particularly banking and finance in general can benefit from your work. Thank you very much for your presentation. Since we have limited time, now we need to move to our next presenter. Thank you, Doctor, for your time and
thank you
for your wonderful presentation. Okay, now we have next presenter, Noor Hidayah Kamar. Sorry, I'm not able to pronounce your name correctly. Kamar Zuman. Yes. So thank you for your time, and now floor is yours, but please keep in mind that we have a limited time, so please be very brief and as specific as possible. Thank you very much.
Okay, sure. Thank you.
Yeah, your screen is visible. You can continue. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh to
Walaikum
everyone.
salam.
Okay, so my topic actually for the research is responsibilities of customers and Islamic banks to manage and recover impact financing. Okay, so background of my research actually, okay. As we know, Islamic financing facility actually has become significant demand, especially in Malaysia nowadays. And even the customers of Islamic financing consists of non-Muslim and also Muslim in Malaysia. And the Islamic banks will grant financing upon request by the customers, and they will conclude a binding contract between both parties, in which this will create an obligations on both parties based on the contract. And the customers will have to meet the repayment terms of the financing in accordance with the contract with the banks. So even in Surah Al-Ma'idah, verse 1 also has provides that parties should fulfill their obligation. However, the Islamic banks in Malaysia also are still exposed to the risk of default on repayment by the customers, which also lead to creation of impact financing. So problem statement is Islamic bank is one of the financial intermediaries for customers to obtain financing, but Islamic bank is still facing the risk of impact financing as a result of the customers' inability to pay their debts due and owed to the banks. So from this, we know that both parties actually have significant roles to reduce the impact financing, which led to this research to study the responsibility of the customers and financial institution, which is the Islamic banks, in managing their impact financing, and to examine the methods used by one of the Islamic bank in recovering the impact financing. So the research objective to examine the relevant provision in the facility agreements of 3 different Islamic banks in regulating and reducing the impact financing, in which I'll choose 3 different Islamic banks to determine the responsibilities of customers and Islamic banks on impact financing, to study the mechanism used by Bank A in managing and recovering its impact financing. So the question will be what is the effect of the provision in the facility agreements on the impact financing? What are the responsibilities of the customer and also the banks on impact financing, and how Bank A manage and recover its impact financing? The significance of this study is to highlight the roles and duties of the customers and Islamic banks in managing and handling impact financing, and to enlighten readers to understand the customers' responsibilities in fulfilling their financing obligation, as well as to analyze recovery steps taken by Bank A in dealing with impact financing. So from the study, we also see a few literatures to study on the topic. So firstly, on impact financing, article by Amiruddin, Siti Nurul Huda and Shahrina states that impact financing occurs as a result of event of default made by customers due to their failure in repayment of financing. The default had led to breach of contract entered by the customer with the Islamic banks. Bank Negara Malaysia, which is Central Bank of Malaysia, had defined impact financing as the situation where the principal or interest or profit payment has been in arrears for 3 months and above. So meaning to say, when the customer failed to repay the payment more than 3 months, so the impact financing will occur. So according to Alias, Matno and Mahayati, the effect of impact financing to customers, it will be the customer will be breach of their financing contract, and then the late payment charge will be imposed on the customers due to the late payment of the financing within the due date as per the contract. And then to the Islamic banks, there will be formation of credit risk, reduction of profit, and will increase the bank loss. So according to Kabir Hassan, Aisyah Muniza, and Zakaria Mustafa, Bank Negara Malaysia, the Central Bank of Malaysia, states that credit risk is the risk of counterparty's failure to perform the repayment obligation under the financing. And the Islamic financial institution shall establish credit risk management, which is responsible to manage the credit risk, including to create a sound credit risk assessment, to monitor credit risk, arrange for complete credit risk mitigation in order to control and manage the impact financing.
So sorry to interrupt. Can you go through this literature? I think we have limited time, so just to give a brief literature like the main one, and the rest, of course, the detail is already there in the conference brochures, and maybe the people already have this, so they will look from there. Thank you.
And finding. Okay, first on the facility agreements. So for the banks, I look at the compensation clause, which is started, and also the event of default clause. So from the three banks, actually, it can be construed that the compensation clause, they have compensation clause in their agreement. So in the event that the customers late in their repayment, so the bank will have the right to impose compensation to the customers. Even though Bank A not mentioned that the compensation cannot be compounded, but based on Central Bank of Malaysia guidelines on late payment charges, it is clear that for Islamic banks and also Islamic financing, the bank cannot compound the late payment charge to the customers. So, and then secondly, for event of default clause, so all the three banks actually has the provision related to event of default, whereby in case of non-payment of the monthly installment, so the banks has the rights to exercise their power to terminate the facility by giving notice, and also to proceed with the necessary action to recover the outstanding sums owed by the customers to the bank. So from this, actually, from the three banks, actually, we can consider that actually the banks adopt similar provision in their agreement, and also we know that in case of any of event of default, the bank has right to remedy the financing from the customer by taking the necessary action, including legal action. So what is the responsibility of the customers and Islamic bank? So actually for the customer, okay, based on the case Sigal Rose Sdn Bhd and Maybank Islamic Berhad, we can extract that the main responsibility of the customers actually is to perform the obligation. However, in case of the customer is unable to pay their monthly installment and cannot meet their repayment, so actually they can go to their banks to discuss and get an amicable settlement. However, most customers nowadays, they keep on silent and until the bank actually take action against them. So for Islamic banks, once the customers reach them, so they can consider to give an assistance to the customers by reaching a voluntary arrangement or make an amicable settlement with the customers. So for example, they can make a reschedule and restructuring of the facility, grant a moratorium or deferment of payment to the customers according to the negotiation between the parties. However, in case the customers still not reach the bank or cannot continue to default, then the bank can exercise its power to initiate the legal action against the customer. So lastly, on the recovery mechanism by Bank A, from the interview by with one of the recovery officer from the bank's department, so we can extract that they have 5 mechanisms to recover their impact financing from the customer. Okay, firstly, they will do a preliminary approach by issuing reminders and notices to the customers, and they will also engage external debt collectors to assist in their collection of debt. And however, in case of the customers still fail to remedy the default, so the banks will proceed with the legal proceeding or civil suit. So they will go to court of law, and they will secure a judgment and continue with execution proceeding to recover the money and debt owed by the customers. So next, they can also do foreclosure proceeding in case that the customer actually has provide security for the financing. So the bank will proceed with foreclosure proceeding for property assigned or charged by the customers to the bank for security of the financing. So in case of 1, 2, and 3 still fail to get to remedy the default, the bank will can opt for right of debt from the bank's portfolio. However, this is only if the banks think that the debt is incapable to be remedied and collected from the customers, and the decision to write off the debt must be presented and approved by the board of the bank and also the approving authority of the bank. And lastly, the bank can also opt to dispose the non-performing financing by selling the impaired financing to another banks, to another Islamic banks or third-party company. However, this must follow conditions and guidelines stipulated by the Central Bank of Malaysia and also the Islamic Financial Services Act, the statutes for Islamic banks in Malaysia. And this transaction also actually needs to be approved by the Central Bank of Malaysia. So from this, actually, we can see that impaired financing occurs due to customers' default in servicing their monthly repayment, which has led to the facility to be in areas more than 3 months that will impact the banks actually. So from this, we can see that almost all the Islamic banks adopt similar provision in the facility agreement, which actually the customer should know and aware that in case they are breached, there will be another consequences that will be taken by the banks to recover the impaired financing. So both the customers and the Islamic bank actually need to act accordingly to their responsibility to reduce this impact, the impact of impaired financing to both parties. And it is recommended that as the impaired financing will expose the customers to civil suit as well as affecting the customer's credit history, so the customer need to approach the bank to find the best solution in settling their repayment issue, because nowadays, if the customer keep on silent, then the bank couldn't assist to settle the issue. And also the bank also need to create best policy and strategies in managing and recover the impaired financing. That's all from me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Doctor, for your wonderful presentation. Now the floor is open for Q&A, and also if someone have suggestions to improve the work, so you can go ahead. Anyone have a comments, a question or suggestion? Okay, I think one thing I just want to ask, I try to understand that whenever we are talking about Islamic bank, when they provide loan, okay, you also have one, I think, point when you are discussing that a customer is supposed to inform the bank before default or they're going to default. So they're supposed to inform the bank. Even I think if the customer inform the bank that I'm not able to pay. For example, if a person have lost the job, now he is not able or she is not able to pay the payments. Let's suppose she's borrowed for a house. So then how the Islamic bank can help in this way?
Okay, actually we also have in Malaysia another if the bank cannot assist in this one, the customer actually can go to another assistance services. For example, we know as a KPK here in Malaysia, agency credit, to assist to manage all the customers, all the customers' credit history, so that the agency will assist the customer in maybe meeting the lowest payment, monthly payment that the customer can pay to the banks. So once the customer actually register with the agency, all the bank actually need to follow what the agency need to follow what the agency has create based on the agreement with the customer.
The agency is a private or it's a government entity?
The agency is also managed under the purview of our Central Bank of Malaysia.
Okay, so it means the agency will do assessment and they will look at the customer, their, for example, financial condition and situation. If the customer is a genuine issue, then they can come up with a solution. I think that's a good initiative as a government agency, but normally whenever customer, even if a customer report to the bank that I'm not able to pay because of losing a job or some other any issue. So maybe I think bank will not give I think an incentive, even if it's Islamic or conventional. Of course, there's a pressure of that the money bank have is not their own money. Majority of the money is coming through deposit. It's a public money, but again, I think that's a good initiative that a government have some agency which can look at the genuine case, and then they can come up with the solution before going to the court. And then, of course, in the court there is a lot of extra expenses on customer as well as on bank. Okay, thank you very much. It's
Yes.
good presentation. So of course we have learned a lot, and hopefully participants have benefited from your work. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
So the next presenter we have is the this is Umi. Can you hello? I don't know your full name. Can I have your full name? Umi, I don't know. It's Umi Abdurrahman or Umi Eb. Are you here?
Yeah, I'm just listening because I'll be in the next session.
Okay, you will be next session. Then the next one we have Rosni Hassan.
What is it? I cannot hear.
This is Rosni Hassan.
No, my paper is already presented just now. I'm a co-author together
Okay,
with
thank you.
the first presenter.
Actually, I don't have the detailed brochure, so I think is there anyone who left from presentation? Hello.
I think, if I may, based on section 10 here, Dr. Shabir, Prof.
Yes.
Shabir,
Yes.
this is Dr. Said Marwan. I think he's here.
Yeah. He is already presented.
Already
Already
presented.
presented, Prof. First
Oh,
one.
okay. I
First
came
one.
in. So I'm
Then
not sure
can-
what others. Others are Sigit Pramano from Indonesia. Those two papers, right? And then the last one was is from USIM, Nur Haziah Nawal, but I'm not sure.
Actually, the program a little bit has changed, so I'm not sure exactly that how many presenter I have in my session, and sometimes there's maybe changing. So that's why
Maybe we can ask the sister here, Sister Diruba. Have you contacted the other presenters?
Yes.
I think the Sister Diruba is part of the organizer.
Yeah.
right?
That's I think this is what we have for today. I think because we hello, Diloba is here.
I think they might be confused as well because the time does not mention it is Istanbul.
Yeah, this is also
But
one of
it's,
the-
but it's
there may be-
stated in the email.
there was some changing, like in the program, you know that in the middle you have a brochure, you have a detail, and then sometimes you switch presenter from one session to another. So that's why you may face some clarities. Sorry for that, but I think so we have, I think, this presenter for today. If we have a next presenter or some other, maybe we can move them to a next session. So thank you very much for your time and for your
Yeah.
presentation.
Thank you very
And
much.
a wonderful
Thank
presentation. You learned a lot. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Shabir.
Thank you.
Inshallah, if we can communicate later, yeah.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I found your work, and this Dr. Noor Hidayah work, and of course, very interesting. So we can communicate and we can work together. And
Okay, inshallah.
actually, I also graduated from INCF. So I have a lot of good time in Malaysia. It's like I spent 5 years. from 2015 to 2019. So almost 5 to 4 years. So I have a lot of good memory there. So hopefully we can have work. And
Okay,
one
inshallah.
day you can also come here for our physical conference.
Inshallah.
Thank you. Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you very much.
Assalamualaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Assalamualaikum.